Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. My name is Adam Levine, and I am the Executive Director here at the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council, or NYMTC. As the Downstate Region's Metropolitan Planning Organization, NYMTC provides a collaborative planning forum to address transportation-related issues and develop regional plans through our members' shared vision for the transportation network that connects New York City, Long Island, and the lower Hudson Valley. Welcome to our virtual Brown Bag event featuring presentations from NYMTC's 2024 to 2025 September 11th Memorial Fellowship Program Scholars. There will be an opportunity for questions following today's presentation, so please type your questions into the WebEx chat box, and we will address those questions to the scholars after they have all completed their presentations. Please note that this webinar is eligible for 1.5 certification maintenance credits from the American Planning Association, and you will find more information about this in the chat. The September 11th Memorial Program for Regional Transportation Planning honors 3 NYMTC staff members who perished in the attacks on the World Trade Center: Ignatius Adanga, Charles Lesperance, and See Wong Shum. The program aids students and organizations with projects in both academic and public policy arenas to educate and motivate those who are interested in transportation technology and planning. Before we begin, I would like to recognize our colleague, Hao Wong, PhD, Associate Professor and Graduate Director from the Rutgers Region 2 University Transportation Center, NYMTC's partners in this program. Hao Wong is with us today and would like to say a few words. Hao?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Great.
I think we have a few slides.
Oh, okay.
I think someone will be shared from your side, or you need me to myself.
Yeah, I'm just about to share.
Okay, sure.
Got it.
Great.
Right. You should be seeing them.
Okay, thank you, everyone. My name is Hao Wang. I'm currently a professor at the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering, and also affiliated with the CADE. So just give you a few overview about CADE, because we are managing the 9/11 fellowship program. Next. So as you may know, actually, CADE is a University Transmission Center designated by U.S. Department of Transportation since 1980. Currently, we are part of the 2 centers. First one, we are in the regional center. Actually, this is at the ending stage. But this center actually having like 9 or 10 universities from this region. Actually, many of the fellowship recipients actually are coming from these universities. So we're collaborating them to solving the regional challenges on transportation, both system and infrastructure network. Next one. It is also part of the new center. This actually new center was founded by USDOT 2023. The new center was led by Texas University, Prairie View A&M University, and also we are part of the this group. Actually, this center was more focused on durability and extending the life of the infrastructure of transportation. So the new center will be valid until actually 2028. Next one. As a partner with the NYMTC, we are managing this September 11th Memorial Program Fellowship. So you can see basically this website gives you the updated information every year. Actually, I think this year's topic was posted a few months ago, and the new recipients actually were just notified. So your group actually is presenting the work from the past year. So feel free to send an email or ask us any future updates for this. And also you can check this website for any updates. Thank you very much. And I look forward to the workshop's presentation. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Hao. We're also honored to have a family member with us today. Renee Alexander, who was the fiance of Charles Lesperance, has been part of the 9/11 Memorial Fellowship from its inception and helps select students for the program each year. Renee is also part of the academic world and serves as Associate Dean of Students and Senior Advisor to the Dean at Cornell University, and she is Director of Cornell's Intercultural Programs. Renee has joined us in person and would like to say a few words. Renee?
I would, and thank you very much for the introduction. Let me start by offering congratulations to our scholars, to our interns. I think that's the word that we use. Congratulations. As I'm speaking with you, I'm thinking of the definition of success, which is when preparation meets opportunity. And you have stepped up and leveraged a strategic opportunity. So my suggestion to you is keep elevating, keep growing, and keep just advancing. I can't think of a better representation for our fallen colleagues of 9/11 than this kind of legacy and advancement. So keep growing, and we're going to be watching to see where you take your talents. Thank you very much.
Very well said. Thank you, Renee. Really appreciate that. Next up, we are again honored to be joined by Jerry Bogaz, who recently retired after working in NYMTC for nearly 30 years. Before his retirement, Jerry served as the Assistant Director of Planning and Program Management for NYMTC. And in that role, Jerry played a vital role in advancing transportation efforts and ensuring communities of concern are included and participate in the transportation planning process. Please join me in welcoming Jerry to share more about the 9/11 Memorial Scholarship Award Program. Jerry?
Adam, thank you. And thank you so much for the invitation to participate. This program is very important to me personally, and it's also important to all the NYMTC staff members and the members who were on staff and working in the organization on 9/11. I'm just going to take a minute to give a little bit of information about the staff perspectives on the program in the aftermath of 9/11. One of the things that the staff was struggling with, having lost 3 colleagues in unprecedented circumstances, was how best to honor them. They basically came to work that day and they were killed doing their jobs. How do you reflect that? We did consider and discuss static commemorations, things like plaques or signs, or in fact, the 3 NYMTC conference rooms are named after them. And that seemed fine, but it seemed something that would fade in time. And then we were thinking more about a living memorial to these 3 people. So how best to reflect their efforts at work in a living memorial. And that's how we came up with proposing something like the 9/11 program. And the reason for that is threefold. First of all, NYMTC does bring federal planning dollars into the region to support planning activities of the staff and its member agencies. So advancing planning activities seem to be a good way to reflect and reflect on them and what they were doing as part of NYMTC staff. We also wanted to train the next generation of planners in some way, contribute to their training. They were all in school and so forth. This would give them some real life experience in actually participating in the planning process. That was very important. And third, but not least, is certainly keeping the names of our colleagues alive. And so every year, as part of this program, when we advertise first to students through Kate, the availability of the program, and then of course when they do their presentations, as we're doing today, the names of our 3 colleagues are a critical part of the program, and everyone's reminded that these 3 people worked in regional transportation planning, and their lives were ended under unprecedented circumstances. So those, from the perspective of the staff, that was what was proposed to the member agencies. The member agencies were very open to doing this. We made sure to check with the federal agencies too, to make sure that this made sense in terms of the use of federal dollars. And everyone agreed back in 2005 was the first year of this program. And it's a great honor, really, to know so many students have come through the program. Some of whom, maybe many of whom, have gotten jobs in the region and in the industry. So that's sort of the staff perspective on this program, and I know it's very important to the current staff as well as to the staff that was present for 9/11. So I'll stop there, but again, thank you so much for being able to give that context for today's presentations, and congratulations to the students.
Thank you, Jerry. It's really great to get you to share the historical perspective on how this came about. Much appreciated. So, all right, let's move forward then with the presentations from the students. Before we get to them, though, the scholars, I'm going to introduce them. We're going to hear from 6 exceptional scholars today. First up, Uwek De Souza is a Master of City and Regional Planning student at Rutgers University. As a New York State Department of Transportation or NYSDOT fellow, he examined the economic impacts of complete streets and develops methods for agencies to measure their benefits in roadway and downtown contexts. Afia Ibnat Subah is a Master of Science student in Civil and Environmental Engineering at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. And as a NYSDOT fellow, she researched latent demand and mode shift potential for shared, micro, and active transportation in diverse settings. Bennett Jonathan is a Master of Science student in Civil Engineering at Columbia University. and Bennett's Fellowship involved advancing a New York City Department of Transportation, or NYCDOT, initiative to evaluate best practices to improve curb cut safety near schools. Paula Yagi is a PhD student in civil and environmental engineering at Rutgers University, and as a New York City DOT fellow, she researched global best practices and innovations to mitigate air and noise pollution from urban highways with a focus on applications for New York City infrastructure. Elliot Wareham, a Master of Urban Planning graduate from NYU, completed a fellowship with the New York City Department of City Planning, researching public realm conditions along the proposed Interborough Express, or IBX. His work focused on land use, zoning, and urban design in underserved areas of Brooklyn and Queens. And finally, E.J. Shin is a Master of Science in Civil Engineering and a Master of Architecture graduate from Columbia University. As a NYSDOT fellow, E.J. explored the use of open source data and documented innovative transportation and community planning practices globally. Quite an accomplished group. As a reminder, there will be an opportunity for questions following today's presentations, so please type your questions into the WebEx chat box, and we'll address your questions to the scholars after all 6 have completed their presentation. We will address as many questions as time permits. With that, I would like to introduce Vivek D'Souza. Vivek. Sorry, Vivek. You're up. Looks like you're unmuted.
Yeah, can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, you are
Yeah.
good to go.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is Vivek D'Souza. I graduated with a master's in city and regional planning from the Blaustein School at Rutgers University. And today I'll be sharing my research and some insights on the economic impacts of complete streets conducted with the New York State Department of Transportation. So before I start, I'd like to extend my sincere gratitude to the many people who made this research possible. First and foremost, to all my mentors at NYSDOT, NYMTC, and the Blaustein School, especially Colleen Ali and Professor Kelsey Ralph for their mentorship, expertise, and guidance. Second of all, to the NYSDOT data team, Richard and Jijao, and the project team members, Corey and Celeste, for their feedback and making the data available and accessible. To Professor James DeFilippis and Professor Mishi for their continued support, and to Setu, Jumi, and Olu, Courtney, and Assistant Dean Western from the Blaustein School for all the administrative, logistical, and technical assistance. So my presentation is outlined in 6 broad sort of areas. I'll be discussing some background on what complete streets are, and then move on to the specific objectives of the project. I'll explain how we selected our case study sites, the data sources we used, and then sort of dive into the core of our analysis and insights. And then finally, I'll conclude with the key takeaways and a proposed framework for future evaluation. So what are complete streets? Complete streets at the core are transportation policy and redesign approaches that ensures that streets are safe and accessible for all users and not just cars. They accommodate different users of the street. And the fundamental principle of complete streets is prioritizing people over automobiles and providing a variety of choice for how people participate and engage in community life. Complete streets take different forms, from small localized improvements to large corridor-specific changes. A key point here is that there is no one-size-fits-all design for a complete street. And as you can see, what works in a dense and urban environment in New York City, like outdoor seating and dedicated bus lanes, is different from what's needed in a rural setting like Ernesto, which might focus more on ADA, ramps, and safer crosswalks. Complete streets have several positive benefits. The most immediate benefit is road safety by reducing motor vehicle crashes. They also increase mobility and access, encourage social interaction, and contribute to overall public health by encouraging active transportation like walking and biking. While these benefits are well established and documented, my research focuses on the economic impacts by specifically looking at businesses. A study of Smart Growth America found that 8 of 10 projects saw an increase in residential property values. So then this leads to our central question: do businesses also see a positive benefit from these improvements? To answer that question, we established three primary objectives. The first is to identify specific design elements and land use contexts that enhance multimodal transportation access. The second is to identify best practices for analyzing the economic impact. And the third is to propose a framework that planning agencies and other governments can use to measure their own complete streets projects. So to inform our approach, I first reviewed existing literature on the economic benefits of complete streets. This helped us as a team to understand what has been studied, what works and what does not. So our literature review synthesized finding across different modes of transportation. For instance, in bicycle infrastructure, we saw that protected bike lanes in dense and mixed use areas consistently outperformed shared lanes in generating economic activity, particularly for restaurants and retail. And another example is high frequency, reliable transit like BRT and light rail can also boost property values and business activity only and only if they have dedicated infrastructure that supports these modes of transportation. At the same time, the literature also highlighted the potential negative impacts such as gentrification, construction disruption for small businesses, and the lack of benefit in car-dependent low-density areas. This tells us that for complete streets to succeed, context and supportive policy are very integral and how we propose, implement, and measure change. With this context in mind, we selected 7 project sites from across the New York State for our analysis. We intentionally chose a diverse set of projects to see how the context influences outcomes. Our selection criteria focused on diversity in context and geography, that is from urban, suburban, and rural, in the types of complete streets that were implemented, and as well as their completion timeline, with Canton Village reconstruction project, for example, being completed in 2013, to the most recent one, East Main Street reconstruction, which was completed in 2023. This allowed us to analyze both recent projects and the ones that had more time for their impacts to materialize. So a couple of slides for now will show you the before and after of some of the complete streets projects that we evaluated. And these are Google images, a snapshot of the corridors that we witnessed. So the first one is the Canton Village reconstruction project. This is in Canton, St. Lawrence County, which is a rural context. This was completed in 2013. And some of the improvements implemented were sidewalks, pedestrian bump outs, ornamental lighting, benches, and street trees. The second one is the Erie Boulevard reconstruction project in Schenectady County. This is an urban context completed in 2016. Some of the improvements were streetscapes enhancements like lighting, benches, and trees, some traffic calming measures, but also crosswalks, new parking, and additional depth of frontage between businesses and curb lines. The third one is the New York Route 347 reconstruction from Terry Road to Gibbs Pond Road. This is in Suffolk County, having a slightly suburban context and completed in 2017. Some of the improvements were the shared use paths, pedestrian sidewalks, ADA ramps, enhanced bus shelters, medians, pedestrian crosswalks, and timers. The fourth project is the Inner Loop East Transformation Project. This is in Rochester, Monroe County with an urban context and was completed in 2018. The main improvement was to improve the geometric design of the street, but also additional improvements like on-street parking, lighting, pedestrian accommodations in conformance with ADA standards, and a two-way cycle track from Monroe Avenue to University Avenue. The fifth project that we analyzed was Route 14 MBC paving. This is in Watkins Glen Village in Reading Town. This is in Schuler County, having a slightly rural context and completed in 2019. Some of the improvements were adding gateway features, street lighting, ADA ramps, crosswalks, sidewalks, and adding a curved median along the center of the street. The fifth project is the New York 5S Oriskany Street Safety Improvement Project. This has a mix of suburban and urban features in Oneida County. This was completed in 2021. The major improvement was converting an expressway into a roundabout, but also other additional improvements included dedicated bicycle facilities, pedestrian crossing distances were reduced, mid-block crossings were added. And the seventh and the last project that we analyzed is the East Main Street Reconstruction Project in Rochester, Monroe County again. This is an urban context completed recently in 2023. Here, the sidewalk feats included 4-foot space for streetlight poles, trees, traffic signs, and also other pedestrian amenities. There were sidewalks and curb ramps included and 2 mid-block crossings with public space and bike facilities. So to analyze the impact of these projects, we gathered data from several key sources. We used NICE.'s sort of data layers on projected locations, businesses, and property prices. We also considered business sales data from Replica and demographic data from the American Community Survey. We analyzed all of these trends within a 1.25-mile buffer from each project site to capture the local area's economic activity. So as far as the analysis and insights are concerned, we looked at several key metrics: changes in business count, number of employees, and property values. And then to gain a preliminary understanding, we calculated a correlation matrix to see if changes in these matrix were associated with both the composite and individual improvements. Here is an example of a correlation matrix of one of the project sites. And each value that is closer to 1 is a positive relationship. Each value that's closer to -1 associates a negative relationship, and 0 is a no linear relationship. And so what we see from the analysis, just to summarize, is that 3 sites, Canton Village Reconstruction Project, the Inner Loop, and the East Main Street project showed moderate to strong positive correlations between complete streets improvements and business growth. However, the other 3 sites, Erie Boulevard, New York State 347, and New York 5S, showed weaker or negligible correlations. The key takeaway here is that complete streets improvements can be associated with business growth, but it's not a guaranteed outcome. The positive effects were more pronounced in projects that were likely part of larger neighborhood revitalization efforts and not just isolated improvements themselves. So as a takeaway and looking at all of the analysis based on these findings, we propose a process-based iterative framework for evaluation. It starts with collecting the right baseline data on economic mobility and safety metrics. It's critical to also define your geography and use community-specific data through surveys and interviews. Depending on geography, different statistical approaches can be used. There are different ways of measuring the built environment and built environment characteristics. Difference in difference model for urban areas or interrupted time series in rural contexts where finding a control group is much harder. And finally, like as I mentioned, this is an iterative process. It should include stakeholder feedback to understand the why behind the numbers. Thank you so much.
Yes, we can't do too much there. Hope everyone can hear us. Looks like good. Okay. That was terrific. I've got a few thoughts myself and maybe some questions if there's time later, but I do want to get to everybody else before we pause for those. And I would just want to remind folks, please, now while it's fresh, please type any questions you might have about that complete streets study in the chat right now. That would be great, and we'll queue them up. So next up, I would like to introduce Afia Ibnat and she's going to give us her presentation. Afia?
Hi, so I'm going to share my screen. Um, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm Afia Ibnat, currently a master's student at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. And for the September 11 Memorial Fellowship Program, I worked on determining latent demand and mode shift potential for shared mobility, micromobility, and active transportation across rural, suburban, urban settings with New York State Department of Transportation. So let's get started. First of all, I want to express my gratitude to my research mentors. Firstly, Karen M. Law from New York State Department of Transportation, then Ali Afshar, PhD from New York Metropolitan Transportation Council, and last but of course not the least, Richard Batchelder from New York State Department of Transportation, who helped me for data analysis part. Now I will talk about my research, and I'm very excited about it. So first of all, I want to talk about from the very basic definition. And so, what is latent demand? So it is an unobserved portion of the demand curve. It is a pent-up demand that can be activated by improvements to transportation infrastructure and services. From a marketing perspective, latent demand exists when a consumer cannot satisfy a desire due to insufficient funds, lack of product or service availability, or lack of awareness. Psychological theories characterize latent demand as one kind of induced demand, which is a desire that a consumer cannot satisfy because they are unaware of it or cannot envision the product or service. Because my research is on transportation infrastructure and transportation planning. So it is very important for me to understand latent demand from a transportation perspective. And that's why I did some literature review to understand latent demand from a transportation perspective. So about that, people have unmet needs or desires for travel that can be activated by improvements in transportation options. People may not travel to a discount retailer that's further away if the traffic is too congested, but they might if a new road is built that makes the trip faster and easier. The concept of latent demand is also linked to missed trips, which represent unmet needs for travel due to transportation disadvantages. And now, what is active transportation? So active transportation consists of very basic modes such as walking, bicycling, and rolling. So now I will start talking about my contribution. So what did I do for this research? I explored the concept of latent demand for active transportation using a GIS-based framework. So GIS means Geographic Information System. By integrating demographic, land use, and attractor variables such as schools, colleges, transit stops, parks, etc. Then I provided a framework for identifying locations with high potential for walking and biking. And lastly, I applied my proposed framework to Troy, New York. I picked Troy as a city because I live here, so I have basic understanding of what infrastructure means what to the residents. Now, about the methodology. QGIS was used as the primary GIS platform to process the spatial data, perform calculations, and generate latent demand score for walking and bicycling. From the literature review, I found that these variables are relevant for determining the latent demand of active transportation. The variables that I found are population by block group, employment by block group, locations of schools and enrollment data, locations of colleges and enrollment data, locations of transit stops, and lastly, locations of recreational facilities such as parks, public golf courses, picnic grounds. Now, how did I handle the variables? So because the variables are very different from each other, I had to use two methods for analyzing the variables. So variables were categorized based on their role in influencing demand. So the methods that I used were firstly segment-based analysis and secondly attractor-based analysis. Population and employment were two variables that I used segment-based analysis for. For that, I created buffers around each route segment using GIS software. The portion of surrounding block groups falling within each buffer was then calculated. Using the ratio of area within buffer and total block group area, the corresponding share of population and employment for each route segment was estimated. This procedure ensures that latent demand is linked proportionally to the segment's surrounding socioeconomic context. This is the formulation that I developed for population, and this is the formulation for employment. Now, for transit stops, I still use segment-based analysis. First of all, I just want to mention why I picked transit stops as one of my variables, because from literature review, I found that walking in the United States is strongly associated with access to public transit. Now, for the method, for transit stops, I created buffers around each road segments, and the number of transit stops within each buffer was counted using GIS. The latent demand indicator was then expressed as the number of transit stops per mile of each road segment. This is the formulation for transit stops. Now about attractor-based analysis. So schools and colleges were two variables that I used attractor-based analysis. First of all, I used schools and colleges as my variables because it allows for the estimation of potential demand associated with educational trips. Now about the method. Buffers were drawn around each attractor, and the extent to which road segments fell within these buffers was calculated. The enrollment figures of schools and colleges were then distributed based on the ratio of the segment length inside the buffer to the total segment length. So the basic difference between a segment-based analysis and an attractor-based analysis is that when I'm doing the segment-based analysis, I created buffers around each road segment, whereas when I am doing the attractor-based analysis, I am using the buffers centering each attractor such as school and college here. So this is the formulation for schools and colleges. They are identical. And this is my last variable, but of course not the least, the recreational facilities. And for that, I used attractor-based analysis also. From the literature review, I found that most frequent purpose for both walking and bicycling was recreational and social in nature. So now about the method. For recreational facilities, buffers were generated around the facilities themselves. The total population residing within these buffers was determined and then distributed across the road segments falling within the buffered areas. So the analysis for recreational facilities actually accounts for recreational tip demand linked to proximity to parks and similar amenities, because the people that are residing in the proximity region to parks and similar amenities are actually the most likely to use those facilities. So this is the formulation for recreational facilities that I developed. Now I will talk about the case study that I applied my framework to. So I applied my framework to City of Troy, which is a mid-sized urban area with a mix of residential, commercial, and institutional land uses. The city has a total population of approximately 51,000, a median age of 33 years, and a weighted average age of 37 years, according to American Community Survey 2023. So here we can see a map of City of Troy with surrounding cities. The blue blurred lines are the streets, and the black lines are actually the boundaries of the cities. Here we can show some maps. We can see some maps of City of Troy consisting of some variables. So the left one are actually showing the City of Troy and surrounding cities with the locations of schools, and the right one is showing the City of Troy and surrounding cities with the location of colleges. So from the maps, we can see that Troy has several schools and only 4 colleges. Here we can see some other maps. The left one is actually showing the City of Troy and surrounding cities with the location of transit stops, and the right one is showing the City of Troy and surrounding cities with the location of parks. So as I mentioned, I used QGIS as my primary GIS platform to analyze my data. Now I have come to the results of my analysis. So this is the table of the top 10 street segments that were showing very high latent demand score for walking. I know that these numbers don't make a lot of sense, but I will, and that's why I will walk through some of the road segments that were actually showing very high latent demand score to actually show you that these numbers actually make sense, or what these road segments actually mean to the city of Troy residents. So let's get started about that. So first of all, Hoosick Street was showing the highest latent demand score for walking. This actually makes a lot of sense because lots of businesses and employments are surrounding that road segment. So lots of people are walking there. Secondly, 15th Street and Federal Street, these both streets were showing very high latent demand score, actually second and third highest. And they are actually just beside Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute campus, which is the largest college here in Troy. And last but not the least, Fifth Avenue was also showing very high latent demand score. So when I was seeing the Google Street View, I saw that this street is just beside the city station, which has apartments designated for students. So lots of students are walking down there. Now, in the same way, I am showing the top 10 street segments for biking that has a very high latent demand score. And in the same way, I'm also going to walk you through the road segments that are actually showing very high latent demand score for biking. So again, Music Street are showing very high latent demand score because, as I already mentioned, that there are lots of businesses and employment surrounding that road segment. And also again, Fifth Avenue was also showing very high latent demand score for biking because it is just beside the city station, and city station has apartments designated for students. And last but not the least, Linden Avenue was also showing very high latent demand score. It's because there is a park and a trail nearby. So maybe there are a lot of people who are actually taking a bicycle there and riding there. So that's why it may show very high latent demand score. So I almost have come to my conclusion of the research, and I think there are some scopes for the future research as well. First of all, from the literature review, I found that incorporating factors such as topography, climate, and weather conditions can lead to a more accurate version of the results. And also, this research should record more detailed data and field visits for feasibility evaluation, as infrastructure should be applied in roadway corridors, not in segments. As you saw that I actually determine my latent demand scores in segments, but when I'm going to apply this as an infrastructure situation, I will of course have to apply that in roadway corridors, not in segments. So this is the references that I used for the presentation. And this is all from me. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for patiently listening to me.
Thank you, Afia. That was really good to see. I guess I'm seeing some back and forth in the chat. Before we move on to our next presentation, I did want to mention, we're hoping that we queue up the questions in the chat for afterwards so that Stephanie will read the questions out, and then the scholars can respond then. We don't want to distract folks who are trying to follow along with presentations by having to jump, which I was actually distracting myself, trying to follow along a little bit with the chat. So thank you, Vivek, for trying to respond to that question, but let's hold off on that going forward so that we can have everybody listen to the questions and the answers. That'll be great. So thank you again, Afia. I've got some questions for you too, if time allows, although I'm more eager to hear from our audience on what questions they may have. But before we get to that, we will again have another presentation, and this one is from Bennett Jonathan. Bennett, are you ready to go?
Yeah. Everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, hear you okay. Haven't seen your presentation yet.
Okay, give me 1 second.
Wait a minute. Are you able to share that?
Mhm.
There it goes. Great. Okay, looks good.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bennett. I am a 9/11 fellow with the New York City Department of Transportation, and my project was on evaluating curb cut safety near schools. And to begin off, I'd like to give words of acknowledgement. I'd like to thank first of all, New York Metropolitan Transportation Council and the Center for Advanced Infrastructure and Transportation at Rutgers for providing me this fellowship. Thank you for Seitu Allen and Jumi Lee for all the support that you've given to me. And also for the New York City Department of Transportation, their transportation planning management, research implementation, and safety and school safety unit. They're phenomenal and they do their best for their city. And I'd like to thank them for that. I'd also like to thank Columbia University for providing me with this opportunity and for my family and friends. And without them, I won't be where I am at now. So to start off, I'd like to give a brief background of the program origin. Why are we doing this? Why are we evaluating curb cut safety in your schools? Well, first of all, in New York City, there's a lot of high volume curb cuts. There's a lot of audit-oriented businesses that are like gas stations, parking lots, laundromat, and those are pedestrian safety concerns because there's been sites linked to multiple fatalities and injuries city wide, which I'll explain after the slide. And so with these interactions, just because with New York City, there's just so many people and vehicles all around, there's a lot of fatalities and injuries related to these. And so Mayor Eric Adams announced commitment to parking lot and gas station traffic calming the methods. And this is one of the instances when that happened. This was in 82 Wyckoff Avenue in Brooklyn. On June 24, 2018, a young child, a 4-year-old named Luz Gonzalez, was struck and killed by a vehicle that was backing out of the Clean City laundry parking lot. If you see on the bottom left corner of the before picture, and you see how there's continuous access along frontage where vehicles can go in and out of the laundromat in any direction. And so the New York City Department of Buildings ordered a lot closure and barrier installation, and the lot reopened 2 years later. And you see in the bottom right corner where there's just one access to the property, and this allows a controlled access between in and out because you see when vehicles go in and out of this property, it goes through a sidewalk, and that's where pedestrians go through, and so that increases the risk. And this is just another example in 2021 in 89110 at 104th Avenue in Brooklyn, where the driver pulled out of a car dealership lot. And in order to go in and out of this dealership lot, you have to drive on the sidewalk. And so a pedestrian was struck and killed. And what's interesting, what's really important about this scenario is you see on the map, there's school system PS 264 and PS 104 right in the vicinity of this area where that happened. And so, and you have a lot of population of youth and school children around. And so this is the project that we're aiming to focus on. The New York City DOT does a pilot program. We chose the 5 test pilot sites. They're all auto-oriented businesses, they're gas stations, and they're all throughout the 5 boroughs of New York. And the city has new building code requirements. Whenever a new building is built, there's these requirements that must be met for curb cuts, which is must be 50 feet from an intersection, must be no longer than 30 feet. Parking lots have to be accessible via a curb cut, and then parking lots have to have a fencing barrier from the sidewalk, and etc. But our focus in this project is to improve existing sites that are in place and how to make them so that they could be up to standard to the new building code requirements. And these may include relocating curb cuts that are close to intersections, closing curb cuts that conflict with bus stops, narrowing wide curb cuts, closing redundant curb cuts, or installing backup sidewalk barriers and bollards. And so these are just some illustration of what those kinds of treatments are. And from clockwise from top left to right, there's the restore full height curb, granite blocks, jersey barriers, pipe bollards, pedestrian fencing, and wheel stops. And these are just also some examples that we focused on in these pilot test site projects: the poured in place curb cuts, wheel stops, and pipe bollards. And before looking at this pilot project, we looked at the previous projects that the New York City DOT has done in the past, which are putting rubber speed bumps and granite blocks in the mobile gas station in Queens Boulevard and 63rd Road, or putting a pedestrian fencing on the Great Dry Cleaners laundromat in the Bronx to prevent vehicles from using the sidewalk to enter, or pipe bollards on Livonia Ave and Tadford Street and Osborne Street, protect pedestrian ramp and reinforce the right of way. And this is just an example of locations around the city where what it means to control access, curb cut access. So in this example, you see there's only one way to go in and out of the property. Or in this example, there's the before and after picture, where you see in the before picture, vehicles can go in and out basically in any direction, in any wherever they want. Whereas in the after picture, these gates prevent vehicles from going in from any direction. And like this, where you see vehicles using the crosswalk to exit the property, where pedestrians would use the crosswalk. And these are just the locations of the 5 pilot sites that the city did. I'm going to go through all of those real quick, but I'm going to focus on 418 Coney Island Avenue for the interest of time. And this is just a quick overview of everything, and then I'll go to 418 Coney Island Avenue. And you see in the before after pictures, there's the we installed backup sidewalk treatment, closed the existing driveway by restoring full height curb and sidewalk. And the same here in 378 Coney Island Avenue, and 4308 Fort Hamilton Parkway in Brooklyn, and 6141 East Gun Hill Road in Bronx. And you might wonder, why are some of them built by BP Oil, why some of them are built by New York City DOT? And the reason being is we, as a city, the DOT wanted to be able to understand what are some of the implementations needed, and what are some of the techniques or the methods needed in order to be able to test run this project, this pilot project. And so being able to construct it ourselves in some of the locations help us give us feedback in order to know what are some of the best practices that we can provide for toolkits for future projects. And this is 43rd 21 Junction Boulevard in Queens. And I'm going to focus on BP gas stations in 418 Coney Island Avenue. You can see the before after pictures. This is the before picture on the bird's eye view. It is located in an intersection, so oftentimes when there's a red light, vehicles would use the gas station as a cut through to avoid intersection, because in New York City, drivers can't turn right on red. And also at the same time, there's multiple wide driveways, and also to concern is one of the curb cuts is actually located adjacent to, in front of the bus stop, where school children would actually wait in line. And all these 5 test pilot sites were chosen because of their close proximity to schools. And you see here and illustrated where bus stop is on the curb cut axis, but there's also a high volume of school-age pedestrians waiting for bus at the curb cuts. And there's also vehicles making wide angle turns to the gas stations. In our speed, we're doing speed tests. Often vehicles could go up to 25 miles per hour into these properties. And this is the turning movement count methodology that we did. It's basically just helps us understand what are some of the most used curb cuts axis and which ones are the least used. And going from top to bottom, for example, on curb cut A, EBR on southbound Coney Island Ave, EBR means eastbound right, and then EBL is eastbound left, northbound, and NBL is northbound left, and etc. And this is the after picture. From a bird's eye view, we closed the driveways that were closest to the intersection near the bus stop by restoring the curb and installing back a sidewalk curb and pipe bollards. And closing these driveways prevent vehicles from making fast wide-angle turns. It also protects school children waiting for the bus, and also eliminates people trying to use the gas station as a cut-through during red light traffic. You see here the before and after picture. And yeah, so thank you for listening to my presentation.
All right, great. Bennett, that was really good. I've got some questions for you with the background in traffic engineering that I'm going to hold on to, and I'm not even sure we'll get to them, but I might actually have to contact you afterwards because I'm very interested in this. So really great presentation. Thank you. And I see the questions keep coming in. So please, folks, feel free to type your questions into the chat for Bennett about the curb cut safety, a great topic. Next up, we are going to hear from, I'd like to introduce Paula Yagi. Paula?
Hi, I'm just gonna share my screen.
Great.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Paula Yaghi, and for the past year, I had the opportunity of working with NYCDOT on the best practices in mitigating air and noise pollution from urban highways. So just before starting, I just want to say that I'm honored to have been a fellow in this program, and I am grateful for the opportunity and the experience. I had the chance to work with an amazing group of people at NYCDOT, and I would like to thank everyone that helped me throughout the year. I could not have done this without their continuous support and guidance. So thank you. So the roadmap of the presentation will be as follows. We'll start with some background and motivation for this project. We will then look at 3 different highway corridors that are of concern regarding air and noise pollution in New York City. Then I will transition to talking about some of the best practices we identified. And after that, we will look at the methodology used to assign the recommendations for improving air and noise conditions. And lastly, I will wrap up with my concluding remarks about the project and some personal thoughts as I walk away from it. I just want to say first that the recommendations presented in this deck are based on the work conducted as part of the fellowship, and they do not represent official policy position of NYCDOT. So just to start, New York City's highways, just like any major city, are essential for mobility and economic activity. However, this comes at a cost. Highways are also a major source of air pollution, excessive noise, and even urban heat. And these burdens, unfortunately, are not shared equally across the communities they are in. Higher levels of exposure to traffic pollutions are consistently found in high poverty neighborhoods, many of which the city designates as DACs, which means disadvantaged communities, as shown on the map in front of you in the blue zones. And you can see some of the highways highlighted just pass through these areas. And this is not just a present day problem, it's compounded by historical injustices, such as redlining, which deprived some of these neighborhoods of resources, leaving them with poorer housing, limited health care, and a higher baseline health vulnerability. And in addition to that, most of New York City's highways date back to the Robert Moses era around the 50s and 60s. And back then, the priority was rapid expansion of core infrastructure, often at the expense of communities they passed through. And now, many of these structures are aging and in need of major repair. However, this created a perfect opportunity, especially as large-scale renewal projects have recently been initiated for some of these infrastructure. And with this opportunity, we can move beyond just fixing concrete and steel to also addressing the long-standing air and noise burdens these corridors have imposed on the nearby neighborhood. And my project set out to support these efforts by looking at the best practices worldwide to mitigate air and noise pollution, adapting them to the specific needs and conditions of New York City, and developing some actionable recommendations that can be used on the short and medium term and also have an effect on the long term. So the focus of the project was on 3 critical corridors of concern, which were highlighted in the maps below, but previously, but we will be looking at each of these corridors in details. The first corridor is the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway, known as the BQE. It stretches from the Verrazano Bridge to the Grand Central Parkway, and it was built in the 40s and 50s under Robert Moses. However, during its construction, it displaced thousands of residents and cut through very dense neighborhoods. And today, it carries over 150,000 vehicles daily, and it's an essential freight corridor. And during the BQE corridor vision surveys, the result of the survey showed that residents are deeply concerned about the highway impact, citing air and noise pollution as fundamental issues, among others. The second corridor of concern is the Cross Bronx Expressway, which runs from the Harlem River to the Throgs Neck Expressway, cutting straight through some of the densest neighborhoods in the Bronx. And it was also built by Moses between in the late 40s up until the 70s. And it's currently one of the most congested American interstates. And residents in this area face some of the highest rates of health issues. And also during the 2024 Reimagine the Cross Bronx engagement process, residents identified air pollution and constant traffic noise as two of their top concerns, citing that they even avoid opening windows and struggle with outdoor activities. And the third corridor of concern is the conduit, which is not as known as the other two, and it's actually somehow different from the BQE and the Cross Bronx because it was never fully built as a highway. It runs from Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn to Lefferts Boulevard in Queens. It has a very wide, underutilized central median separating North Conduit and South Conduit, and this median was originally planned to host the Bushwick Expressway, but was never built. So today, this huge median separates neighborhoods on either side, and the corridor cuts directly through residential districts, acting as a physical barrier. And more than 82,000 people live within a quarter mile of the roadway, many in transportation disadvantage or persistent poverty tracts. So to identify the most effective air and noise mitigation strategies, we conducted a broad literature review, drawing from national but also international resources and example. We evaluated each option based on technical performance, but also on sustainability, cost effectiveness, and implementation complexity. And based on that, we organized the best practices into 3 different levels. We'll start at the source level, and here we focus on addressing emissions and noise right where they begin, or even avoiding their emission or generation. So we're focusing at the vehicle, the pavement, or the flow of traffic. And this is often the most efficient approach because it prevents pollutants and noise before they spread out into the surrounding neighborhoods. So for instance, we can be applying quiet pavement designs, such as adding rubber to the mixture to dampen noise, or having porous pavement, which is a higher air void content in the mixture to absorb noise. As for air quality, we can use pollutant degrading pavement, which is an option, and this is basically applying a certain coating material made out of titanium dioxide on the surface that can help degrade air pollutant whenever it's exposed to UV light from the sun. We also have some traffic management strategies, such as dynamic speeds, which can help smooth traffic flow and avoid pollution spikes. Even something as simple as regular vehicle maintenance or proper tires or smoother driving can help. The second level of mitigation is along the path. And the goal here is to intercept or filter air and noise pollution as it moves away from the roadway. And like that, we can reduce how much of that impact actually reaches the community. Traditional noise walls are one of the most famous options. However, we do have some newer designs which use transparent material or absorptive material, or even vegetation to add both environmental and acoustic benefits. If we're looking at natural barriers, vegetated belts of trees can help buffer the impact of noise while also creating some usable green public space. Earth berms also offer the same benefit, if not more, compared to noise walls while being much cheaper. In some places, we can also have larger interventions like highway caps or deck, which can be used primarily to connect communities, create a public space above, but also contain emission. And the last mitigation level is at the receiver, which is offering a private protection. The focus here is directly protecting the people in their homes and workplaces. This can mean retrofitting buildings with better insulation for noise, upgrading HVAC systems with stronger filtration, or adding greenery to facades and rooftops. However, these measures can be very effective, but they are harder to scale because they involve private property owners and require coordination across many stakeholders. So after identifying the best practices in mitigating air and noise, the goal was to adapt these strategies to New York City's conditions. To better focus our mitigation effort, we broke each of our 3 highway corridors into smaller sections. We started first sectioning the corridors based on the type of highway structure, whether it's at grade, trench, or elevated. And second, we focused on which communities are most exposed to air and noise pollutions. So instead of drawing arbitrary boundaries for the sections, we used a clustering method that grouped census tracts with the largest affected population. This way, our sections represent where people actually live and face the highest risks. And each section was then classified by population exposure, ranging from baseline to critical priority. By that, we mean from the lowest to the highest population exposure. And this helps us identify which area carries the heaviest burden and where mitigation is most urgently needed. And after dividing each corridor into sections, we moved into linking our best practices to these corridors. So from each of the 3 highways, we selected 3 to 4 representative sections for close examinations. And these sections were chosen because they had the highest population exposure. And we also wanted to select sections from different structural topologies. And also, we based our selection on the feedback gathered from residents during the studies conducted by NYCDOT and all the other partners. And for these sections, we looked at 2 levels of solution. First, corridor wide measures that can be applied consistently across all segments without any regard to the section specific, such as applying quieter pavement design to the whole corridor. And the second level we were working on is section-specific strategies tailored to the unique conditions. For example, if a section is trench, we can have vegetated trench walls in this depressed segments. And the overall goal here is to deliver a practical location-tailored solutions that reduce both air and noise pollution while remaining cost-effective. And we also wanted to choose things that can be done on the short, medium term and can also affect the long term. So to wrap up, one of the clearest takeaways from this study is that there is no single solution to addressing air and noise pollution from urban highways. And to address such issues, it's much more fruitful to work on a combination between corridor-wide measures that bring consistency, but also paired with section-specific strategies that reflect the unique characteristics and community needs. At the same time, policy-based solutions offer some of the most powerful tools for reducing traffic volumes and emissions at the source. However, these measures are typically more complex to implement, requiring political will, strong enforcement mechanism, and coordination across multiple agencies. Another important point is that community needs and preferences should always remain at the center of mitigation planning, because even the most technically sound solution cannot succeed without local acceptance. And we also found that some of the most impactful measures are not necessarily the most expensive. In many cases, relatively low-cost interventions can deliver meaningful improvements, sometimes even exceeding the benefits of larger, more resource-intensive infrastructure projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Another great presentation. I don't know if you can hear her now, but Renee has been audibly agreeing with some of the points that you've been making. So I think she may have some questions for you when we get to that point. And I'm certainly jotting down some notes myself. So I am so excited to see that our scholars are so eager to answer your questions that they are just typing away. I understand they put a lot of work into these presentations and these studies, and they're really eager to share what they've learned and what they can convey to you. So I guess I'm not going to succeed in getting them to hold off on doing that, but I'll just maybe gently remind to try to hold off on answering the questions in the chat. But if you can't hold off, be prepared to repeat your answer when we ask it, because Stephanie is still going to read those questions out for everyone and give you an opportunity to vocally answer the questions. So with that, let's move to our next presentation. And our next presenter is Elliot Wareham. Elliot?
Hi everybody. My name is Elliot Wareham, and I have been a fellow at the New York City Department of City Planning over the last year, where we have been doing a public realm assessment and looking at some of the planning opportunities surrounding the Future Interborough Express, or IBX. I'd just like to start out by acknowledging my team here. I worked on the urban design division here at DCP. I want to thank them for making my year so special, especially Crystal Ekshi, who was my mentor and made this project so rewarding. Just an outline of what I will be going through today. I will be going over the background of what the IBX is, then jumping into our methodology, which included a precedent analysis, data analysis and existing conditions analysis, design workshops, site visits, and eventually development of some typologies and public realm recommendations and toolkit. So starting with what is the IBX? So the IBX is an MTA project that hopes to take advantage of an underutilized 14 miles of freight rail in Brooklyn and Queens. The MTA completed a planning and environmental linkages study last year, which recommended light rail as the chosen mode. So it'll be the first light rail station or light rail system in the MTA, which presents some unique opportunities and challenges. There are 19 stations planned for the IBX, with transfers to 17 existing subway lines. The area surrounding the corridor is home to 900,000 people, 260,000 jobs. And in the MTA's latest capital plan, $2.75 billion of funding was approved for the engineering and design, which will be completed by the firms Jacobs and HDR. So, since this is an MTA project, what is DCP doing here? DCP's main approach is land use and zoning, so we're looking at it from that kind of lens. And some of DCP's biggest planning objectives are housing growth, reconnecting communities, supporting industry and job growth, public realm and street safety, and climate resilience, mostly through a land use lens. And getting even more specific, urban design, we are looking at some public realm themes, including access, how do riders get to the station from the street, connectivity, how do people transfer or connect to other modes of travel, open and public space, where are there opportunities for additional open space near the IBX, and as I already mentioned, adjacency, how does the station support nearby land uses? So we started our work with a precedent analysis where we looked at some light rail and rail stations around the world and assessed some of the land use and public realm conditions surrounding these rail stations to kind of get an example of what some best practices are and maybe not so best practices are in terms of public realm planning near rail. So we looked at precedents in LA, Charlotte, North Carolina, here in New York, Berlin, and Melbourne. And I'll give an example of one of the precedents we looked at, which is Newkirk Plaza Station in Brooklyn, New York, served by the MTA's Q line. So as you can see on the left, we took some of the key dimensions of the station, platform length, the length of a pedestrian plaza that's part of the station, walking distances, total area. We did a little bit of land use analysis as well, which isn't pictured here. And on the right, you can see we annotated some more pedestrian views, identifying some of the key public realm elements near these station areas, such as seating options, bollards, and in the red, some of the elements that might not be as good, such as the station was difficult to locate from the roadway. Then we dove into an existing conditions analysis of some of the key conditions near the IBX corridor. We looked at land use, city ownership, vacant sites, bike routes, pedestrian crashes, transit routes, flood risk, among a few other data sources, as well as we went to our borough offices and got some more qualitative data, such as a needs assessment from the community districts, what land use applicants and projects are happening near the IBX stations, as well as more generally streetscape and public realm conditions near the stations. So this is kind of a look at some of the data at a super high level, looking at where, for example, there might be city-owned properties or vacant land that can be used for public realm improvements and housing, and where that's concentrated, looking at a half-mile radius, which is about a 10 to 15-minute walk shed from the station areas. Then we dove into a series of design workshops where we looked at 9 of the IBX stations based on recommendations from both what the MTA thought were priority stations, as well as what here at DCP our borough offices thought were priority stations. So we printed out a big aerial view of the station area, and from the precedent analysis and some of the existing conditions data, we notated and just drew over the aerials, identifying some potential public realm improvements and issues near these stations. From there, we completed a series of site visits. We did precedent site visits to 2 precedent locations in New York City, as well as 4 site visits to 6 of the proposed IBX stations, which, as you can see here, capture a wide variety of public realm and land use conditions. Starting from the left, top left, that is the site of the future Roosevelt Avenue station. Then the existing Utrecht Avenue station head house and platform, streetscape conditions on 61st Street near the proposed 8th Avenue station, the site of the future Atlantic Avenue station, site of the future Myrtle Avenue station, and lastly, the streetscape near the proposed Metropolitan Avenue station. And yeah, like I said, just covering a wide array of conditions and getting that on the ground experience and knowledge of what these station areas are really like. So from all of that data collection that we had undergone and the precedent analysis, we developed 2 different typologies to further analyze and help identify some issues and opportunities near the IBX station areas. So our first typology has to do with the station structure itself. And the stations are broken into 3 primary typologies. The first one would be an open cut, which, if you remember the picture from Roosevelt Avenue a few slides back, it's a station that is in an indentation or depressed from the surrounding topography. There will be below grade stations, which are more like a typical subway station, and then there will be above grade stations, which are located either on bridge or embankment or some kind of elevated structure to the surrounding context. Then we made a series of station area typologies, which have to do more with the context and land use conditions surrounding each of the IBX stations. And we came up with approximately 5 different types that the stations fall into. It's not a perfect. We had to make some generalizations, as you do with any kind of typology. So some of the stations may span more than one typology or not neatly fit in. But starting from the left, the first station type is the anchor station, which is a high-density residential station located near an existing transit interchange with high ridership. These areas have high pedestrian activity and mixed land use. Then the industrial center is primarily industrial within or close to an IBZ or industrial business zone. These areas experience a lot of freight movement, and there's a lot of impervious surface, less pedestrian movement in these station areas. Next is the neighborhood center, which is medium to high density, mixed use areas that are located on a commercial corridor or close to some kind of central business district area. And these also experience high pedestrian activity. Then moving on to the mid-density connector, this is a primarily residential area, medium density. There might be some commercial in these areas, but they're overwhelmingly residential. And there is typically existing transit in these areas, although it might be underutilized. And then lastly, we have the low density connector, which is primarily residential, low density. There is some large low scale commercial, such as mall or big box stores. And out of all the station types, these are the most auto oriented, with few transit connections and bike lanes. And here I'm just diving a little bit deeper into one of the typologies, which is the neighborhood center typology. So as you can see in the bottom left, we identified which stations fall into this typology, as well as outlining some of the key challenges and opportunities for the typology. So for the neighborhood center, some of the key challenges would be that there are transfers between different station conditions, such as from an elevated condition to a cut condition, and how do people move between these different structural conditions. Since they experience high pedestrian activity, existing sidewalks may be insufficient. Similarly, these main streets might have a lack of greening, and these areas, out of most of the typologies, these have been experiencing the highest development pressure, so there's an increasing need to integrate new and existing development near these station areas. And some of the opportunities for the neighborhood center would be that we can situate station entrances near some of the anchor points or nodes, which might be community facilities or commercial districts wherever pedestrians are drawn to. There is a high potential for additional transit supportive land uses in these types. There are capping opportunities for additional public space, and there are some streetscape opportunities to remove parking to extend sidewalks and add bus lanes and amenities. And diving a little bit deeper into, we created two different visionary stations where we got super specific with the public realm recommendations. And we chose these stations based on borough office recommendations. So for Brooklyn, we chose to do this for McDonald Avenue, and for Queens, we chose to do it for Roosevelt Avenue Station. And as you can see on the right, we created a plan of sorts of what some of the potential public realm recommendations that we think this station should have. Described on the left, such as prioritizing a central platform, widening the sidewalk below the elevated rail line, creating some kind of interconnected greenway with pedestrian and bike access, reconnecting streets and improving vehicular movement, and creating a public plaza in the station area. And some of the next steps for our work are kind of wrapping up a full public realm recommendations and toolkit for the MTA, where we kind of outline some more low-touch improvements, such as more simple streetscape improvements or wayfinding improvements, and some of the higher-touch recommendations for public realm improvements, which are things that might require more interagency collaboration and implementation. Then we are making a toolkit for our DCP borough planners and designers to approach the station areas, and then coming up with some of the interagency implementation strategies for public realm improvements. Most of these improvements involve multiple agencies. It's a lot of work to be able to get these improvements done. Some include DCP, MTA, Department of Transportation, Parks, and then finally teeing up the work to potentially some bigger zoning change or rezoning that supports DCP's strategic objectives in the future. And that is it. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, really great presentation, Elliot, on a really exciting project. So I'm sure there are going to be some questions about that, and I hope folks are putting those in the chat. I've got a couple of comments myself. If there's time, I'm not sure there's going to be time though, because we've got one more presentation to come. Last but by no means least is EJ Shin, who is going to give us her presentation as our final speaker. EJ?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
We hear you great. Thanks.
All right, fantastic. I hope my screen is sharing nicely.
It is.
Perfect. All right, last but not least, I will keep it, exciting and energetic. I'm here to present the Exploring Open and Crowdsourced Data for Transportation and Community Planning. And I got a support from New York State Department of Transportation and New York Metropolitan Transportation Council through the 9/11 Memorial Program. I have been serving as a fellow for the last 9 months, And I've recently graduated from Master's in Civil Engineering and Master of Architecture. And I am working for Studio Yo-Yo. And I've been part of the New York community for a while. So what is open and crowdsourced data now? So this could be a relatively new concept, but with so much connectivity that we have with our smartphone and sensors, we are flooded with a large data, and the direction that we're taking is not maximizing all those data that is out there. So this geospatial tool, such as this data connected to a location, is something that can be fully utilized in a public, and this cartographic information that we will be able to use for the planning is abundant. So this is the right time for us to start looking at open and crowdsource. And with this public and open data, this research was executed in a slightly interesting direction of looking at a case study. So I've digged into 5 different case study myself, looking at globally what is the best practices and best scenario that people are using for, and trying to figure out what New York State DOT and what NYMTC could actually benefit off from, so that if we are actually drawing the framework of it, we can actually take away the best lessons that people has been utilizing. So what is the OpenStreetMap? So OpenStreetMap is one of the hub for all of this open source data goes to. This is voluntary based online platform where everyone could upload the information and it's user generated data. And a lot of time the planning, this is being used for planning, also as well created an off application so that actually people are using this information, developing some additional tools for the planning infrastructures. And this is funded both publicly and privately. In European case, there are a lot of uses of funding from the government, as well as Meta is one of the big funders for this platform. So with knowing what OpenStreetMap is, there are 5 large different case studies, starting with the Transport for London and Land Transport Authority and London Cycle Infrastructure and San Diego Bike Lane. And then the last one is not quite of a use case, but of a spin-off of tool that we could potentially utilize using the open crowdsource. So I will be covering all of these 5. So starting with the case study 1, transportation for London is one of the most prevail and long-lasting use case, where they started back in 2009, where they're using the open data to develop, and there was a huge funding that went into this to figure out the real life travel for staff and passenger. And Oyster card is basically what MTA is for us. Not only the subway system, bus system, and even later on you will see the cycling system is actually developed through this OpenStreetMap based crowdsourced data, and they had quite success. The one that you can see on the right is the application that they have developed, and they were approaching this whole philosophy of data belongs to public, which is quite of an interesting spin. And back in 2009, that was very new approach that they were taking. So there's a lot of lessons that we can take from them, and also how they were actually able to expand from what they had. This was quite interesting, and this is a sturdy version of the case study. Now, case study 2, the Land Transport Authority at Singapore. This is very clever way of being able to leverage. So what LTA did is that they were able to provide free Wi-Fi to the public, while the public were able to log on to Wi-Fi to provide their real-time crowd monitoring. And the LTA was able to not only monitor, but predict and be able to deploy the transportation system as needed. in a real time and the demand as they are showing. So this exchange of the Wi-Fi user being able to be part of being generated of the cloud heat map, crowd heat map, was very interesting, clever way of leveraging each other's interests. So what they were also able to do is that they encrypted it to make sure that the privacy is covered, as well as they were using machine learning to be creating a predictive model so that not only monitoring, but they were able to develop predictive model moving it forward. So this was quite interesting examples. Case study 3 and 4 is the bike lane. As I've spoke about the London fully utilizing OpenStreetMap to create this application. What they usually are famous for is that they keep it quite open so that other application could be developed, you know, homegrown. However, the San Francisco case was actually funded federally to develop the software within the public sector. So they were able to create a framework that people are able to provide a granular data set. So instead of using mismatch of not knowing where those information and oftentimes aligning those misfit information into digestible and usable data is quite difficult. But what they were successfully doing here is in San Francisco, their homegrown app were able to do granular information enough to be able to not only spot the improvement and safety of the bike, but also be able to do some prediction of how those economical impact for that cycling path. So they had a good enough granular information to be able to further use, not only limited to the purpose of their use, but be able to push the boundaries of using and applying to further usage of understanding economical growth and impacts of certain aspects of what they were able to monitor in the data. And case study 5, Urban Sim is one of the open source tool for simulating and generating the use of certain policy into a mapping. So this was funded originally by NSF. However, it's being used globally through US, Europe, and Asia, and they can actually test interesting various policy and what the impacts would be. And through this, we can actually definitely use within the transportation. But the interesting part here is that they can actually use both qualitative and quantitative elements as population, tax, as well as the air quality and some other ephemeral elements as a part of factors that we can actually generate the simulation for. So with that, it's very similar to OSM that is open source. And let me show you, this is a 3D rendering and 3D view of information in the system, as well as you can generate the 2D mapping with overlaying and simulation of your own model. So in terms of, and now that we have reviewed all 5 of them, what are the direction that we can take and what are the things that we can actually framework in a larger point of view is number 1, hybrid model in a way that, as I briefly have talked about, aligning different information and data that is thrown into a bucket is, and combing them through is the most difficult part. This amount of information often not necessarily equate to how well you could use. So being able to use hybrid data and being able to be flexible using different type of data is quite important, as well as institutional partnership, whether if it's a federal or nonprofit, and the privacy focused and equity driven strategy of making sure that this open source by its incognito of their privacy could be carried out, and also the right of the information. So with that, what could possibly go wrong? So we also need to keep our eyes out of what kind of danger that is alert as we are thinking of how we can actually apply in New York State and our metropolitan area. Data quality and the contributor fatigue is very inherent to this, I will say, business model or model itself of voluntary based data gathering. So open and crowdsource itself is inherently voluntary based. So realizing that some people might not actually come through all the way of what they set out to, or even the secondary point of the gap in the coverage, if there's not enough population who are willing to volunteer for their time, there might be some potholes of the gap. So this could be actually worked out with some of the machine learning, and there's some other software like H2O to develop a solution so that we can actually fill in those gap in the information or clean up those information. But this is one of the things that we should look out for, as well as privacy concerns again. So what is the key takeaway that as we thought about what kind of large approach that we could potentially take and what we need to keep our eyes out for, and now to key takeaway for New York DOT, New York State DOT and NYMTC is promoting public ownership of the data. So as this is a voluntary base, as I've shared, it will be quite important for us to be able to somewhat market how important this is to do as a voluntary activity and promote the public to be participating in it and integrate diverse data set and being able to work with various category and input of the planning and democratizing planning with open source tool, which is, in a sense, it will be a very bottom up approach if this is able to happen in our state. I want to conclude and share the vision is that toward open source urbanism, empowering citizen as a co-creator of potential marketing and leverages. So letting them very clearly know that they could actually participate in this planning and basis of the planning data collection will actually allow this whole framework of OpenStreetMap ecosystem healthy, because planners going to be able to get the bottom up information as well as they were able to get a public participation through this new concept of working with the new data sets and the planning that is dynamic and inclusive and evidence driven and evidence informed. A lot of these tools are now able to be used also because there's quite a lot of flexibility in machine learning and being able to tease out all this large amount of data that we'll be able to, as long as we're mindful of how we are using this tool, to be able to go to the right direction that we want to take our planning tool to become. And lastly, a roadmap for resilience and responsive system, of course, with all the planners hope for. I do think that through this research, I was able to see the possibility that we could start kind of exploring the possibilities of crowdsource or open source mapping. To wrap up, I want to have a special thanks for my advisors and staffs, Dr. Afshar, who helped me tremendously, as well as Elwood and Celeste, and many others, including Seitu and Jumi. I would like to share my personal experience that I was at a verge of not being able to graduate my master's degree because I was not able to afford the last semester. And thanks to this scholarship, I finally were able to get my master's in civil engineering. And I really, really appreciate this opportunity to have not only been a fellow and done this incredible research, but also managed to be able to graduate. And this fund is a lifesaver to some of the students who are in a tight situation. So I really want to thank you for, all of you guys for organizing and all of you guys for supporting it. So thank you.
Wow, thank you, EJ. That was really great. And you're not the first that said that, but I think all of the students, and I was seeing a couple of folks also putting up some applause there about how impactful these scholarships, these fellowships have been. So really great to hear that it was so critical for you and that it helped you finish and start a company, which I hope we'll get into in a little bit. But open source urbanism, that's a great phrase that I'm going to try and keep in mind. So thank you for that. So, but don't go away. Hopefully folks are typing more questions into the chat. I'm going to turn us over though to Stephanie Brooks, who is going to lead us through that portion of the presentation. Stephanie?
Thanks, Adam, and great job, everybody. You've all done wonderfully. It's been very exciting to watch you grow and progress in this presentation. You guys you've just knocked it out of the park. Thank you all so much. So we do have a bunch of questions in the chat. I'm going to go in the order of speakers. So Vivek, there was a question for Vivek. Was he able to quantify the level of benefits for any of the project locations? And there were some answers in the chat. Vivek, did you want to extrapolate, say anything else about your answer here and mention anything else here?
Just to reiterate for the wider audience, I think so we were not able to directly quantify the benefits across all sites and improvements. I think we incurred some data challenges, including data availability, but also just to add my own limitations as a student and scholar in terms of knowledge and how we use the data, right? So even that is also sort of critical to understand. In terms of replica, I think the major sort of challenge I faced was that these data sets, the business data sets, are only available since 2019. So any project, we had 4 projects that were completed before 2019 that didn't have that business data component to do a more richer analysis. We tried different sort of methods of statistical testing, but we also later realized that depending on the geography, we are not able to do a regression analysis. Canton Village in St. Lawrence County has only 3 census tracts. And so while we were doing that analysis iteratively, we realized that we don't have enough predictor variables to have a deeper, richer sort of regression analysis as well. So yeah, there were some limitations in accessing data and also sort of analyzing it. But I feel like the sort of iterative process that I had sort of presented towards the end of my presentation would help sort of mitigate those challenges. I know that New York is a home rule state, meaning that counties and local governments have a bit of autonomy to sort of govern and make their own decisions. So I do know for a fact that the ways in which data is collected, archived, and also digitized is different in different contexts. So if state agencies can coordinate and request data in a particular format, in a particular way from counties and smaller agencies, that would also be useful at a statewide level to do this kind of analysis. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. That answers the questions you received. Thank you. A couple of questions for Afia, and I know you answered some in the chat, but I'm going to just repeat them here. Can the LDS be translated into an estimate of the number of pedestrians or active transportation users that would make use of the segment? And then there was a follow-up question of, was it possible to take the impacts of transportation improvements on surrounding land use as part of the latent demand analysis? If you want to extrapolate on your answers in the chat, or if there's anything else you want to add, Afia, let us know.
I have written something in the chat, but I also want to add something. For actual exact number for the pedestrian or bicycle users, I mean, if I want to predict that, I need some data of the present condition, like because I have to train the model and everything. So for that, I need the data at the county level. But sadly, I did not. For each county, there is not data, many data available for that. I needed the exact pedestrian counts and bicycle users for each county, but as it seemed, it wasn't available for each and every county. So that's why I had to, I actually was thinking to use a regression analysis or something that sort, but then I decided that that should not be a very viable solution for this research because the data is not available, as I mentioned. So, and that's why I actually used a spatial based analysis where I am using some proxy variables that are very available data, like population, employment, and locations of attractive variables, etc. So I think that answers the question, hopefully. And regarding the transportation improvement, so although I have not used the transportation improvement variable directly in the formulation, but there are some variables like population employment that can be and the indicators of transportation improvement of the surrounding regions. And also if a particular road segment is showing very high latent demand score and that it does not have any active transportation infrastructure there, then that means that that road segment actually requires some active transportation infrastructure because people of the surrounding area of that particular road segment would want to use an active transportation infrastructure if it exists in the future, or if I like build it. So hopefully that is the question, that is the answer of the question.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And just to let all the students know, we're hearing all this great job, everybody. Each of the students is getting a great job and excellent job students and outstanding presentations, everyone. So that you got the chat is just full of lots of good kudos for you. There is one last question that I see in the chat specific to a presentation. It's for EJ. For EJ, did you examine privacy and digital rights issues, given the fact that the majority of big data is brought by third-party firms and they get the data from phone providers, often without users' knowledge or consent, or it is baked into the terms and conditions of apps and other services? Any feedback on that?
So based on my knowledge, I think that once it actually becomes an open source or crowdsource as a public information, where even if somebody so this is why the privacy concern is quite important, right? Because they sometimes don't need to identify where they got those data, but they can actually say that these data I'm uploading on this OpenStreetMap. So sometimes those OpenStreetMap data might actually be a third party or even a phone company's data, but then it's not being monetized to upload it. But then when it's up there, it actually becomes a public information. So you're on point, and that's something that really needs to be worked out. But for example, the case of using the Wi-Fi and using the heat map, they actually purposefully encrypted those data so that they actually could use that and release the term and condition while they are actually saying, yes, I want to use this Wi-Fi. So insular it is, you are able to kind of make that as transparent as possible. But then the nature of OpenStreet and crowdsourced, I think we really, really need to be mindful. And if we do develop something of that nature, we need to definitely come on board. And that was the reason why we need to like check the privacy and all that concern as one of the things to keep our eyes out. So yeah, you're 100% on point.
Thank you so much. These are great answers and great questions. And I think that is the last thing in the chat. So in terms of questions, so Adam, take it away. I know you've got a few.
Yeah, you guys aren't off the hook yet. Sorry, we're gonna get a full 2 hours out of you. So maybe even longer, but I'll try and make sure I don't go beyond. But I do want to, before we get into questions for you guys, actually, hold on, let me change the order just to let everybody know. I'm going to be asking each one of you what's up next for you. So just start thinking about that. But I've also got individual questions or comments on your presentations. But before we get to those, I did want to give another shout out to Seitu Allen and Jimmy Lee for all the work that they did on putting this together, on getting you scholars into the program and helping you to work through the program and work with the agencies and come to today. So it was a great amount of work. Also the team that helped put this together, Maura and Stephanie and Caroline and the folks from FHI, IMEG and Art Street. Great work from everyone. So thank you for that. Seitu and Jumi are so busy they can't even be here right now to accept their flowers, but I'm going to give them anyway because I really do appreciate the work that they did. And yeah, thank you, Renee. So all right, now back to you guys. So all right, Vivek, I'm curious. You mentioned that you used 7. Uh-oh, we got something popping up here that I need to get rid of, otherwise it's going to throw me off. Excuse me, an issue with our computer here. So you mentioned you used 7 projects, and I didn't know if you had a number in terms of how many projects you considered for smart growth. I guess I'm kind of curious how common is it that there are these complete streets areas that you could have considered using as examples? Is that an issue? Was it trouble? Was it easy? You're muted if you're talking.
I think the 7 project sites in New York were very interesting in their own right, in terms of context and in terms of improvements. I got to learn a lot about the different kinds of improvements that varied across the different project sites, and also got a chance to learn about like the investments that NICE has put in, not just in the improvements themselves, but also the level of coordination with counties and adding these improvements as part of larger revitalization efforts. So just like, for example, in Canton Village, they had a revitalization plan. So the county included a lot of businesses, a lot of big box stores, a lot of restaurants, and Complete Street was also a component. So that was interesting to learn that while improvements can be seen as individual projects on its own, there are also improvements and projects that are accompanied and added on to larger sort of revitalization or larger projects that add the benefit as well. In terms of analysis, as I iterated a little bit before, it was both exciting to learn as well as challenging. I think this is the first time I'm doing not just one site, but 7 sort of project sites in great detail. So it took a lot of time and investment to learn more deeply about each project sites and some of the challenges and some of the sort of what they bring to the table. Going to Google Maps and looking at visibly how these improvements look in real life and in a real world setting. So yeah, it was for me a good experience. Yeah.
That's great. 7, yeah, 7 is a lot, but it's great
Yes.
that you're able to see so many different types of uses or different locations of the complete streets. I was really excited to see that you noted that bike lanes boost business, which, for some folks who are arguing against bike lanes in their neighborhoods, that's a great argument to make that, in addition to being safer and promoting active transportation, it can be a boon to the economy, the local economy. And it was also interesting to see the Utica Oriskany Road Diet and Roundabout. I thought that one was pretty cool. I actually grew up along New York 347, which is Wisconsin Highway in that area. And so I'm familiar with that project. And I thought it was interesting that you said no evidence supported really the business growth. I'm thinking perhaps that might be because it was just the one project in a series of projects that aren't even finished yet. I mean, the whole corridor is being revitalized,
Yes.
including projects that are coming in our upcoming planning program, capital program. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops and how it grows, similarly to what happened on the west side of Manhattan when they took down the West Side Highway and replaced it with a boulevard. It was a rundown, dock area for so many years, and now it's a park and revitalized and seen tremendous growth. So we certainly have seen historically how that can be a real boon to the area. So really great. Thank you. Now you're up. Okay, what's next for you?
I'm finishing my presentation. I mean, I'm finishing my project work, writing the report, but I'm also actively looking at work opportunities. So moving on to sort of like a professional space in transportation planning and a little bit of design. I learned a little bit of design in school, so I'm trying to also use the design skills, transportation planning skills, a little bit of analysis, mostly in complete streets, active transportation, road safety. So the hunt is going on, and yeah, I will update you when I get something. Yes.
Well, I'm happy that we can help get the word out to the attendees here that you are available for work if they are hiring. So that's great.
Yes.
Good to know.
Thank you.
All right, good luck and thank you, Vivek. All right, Afia. So I was curious about in Troy, you live in Troy and you focused your project in Troy. And I'm curious if you learned more about your own hometown as you were doing this project.
Thank you for the question. So, did you ask about the hometown? Means I'm from Bangladesh actually. So, I mean, do you want me to say something about the country that, I mean, the city that I have grown up in? Is it?
That's what I'm interested in. Like, for instance, I don't live in Troy, but I did notice when you put up the slide showing the parks that, boy, it looks like Troy could use some more parks. There's only one big park and a small park. And I'm just wondering, along those lines, if there are things that you learned about the city of Troy that perhaps, as a student and resident, you didn't know before.
Oh, yeah, sure. So I think I already knew that Troy has a lot of students, student living here because there are lots of colleges here. So students can be a very good variable. I mean, students can be a very good impacting factor that actually affect the walking and biking infrastructure. So, and another thing is that I did not know. Okay, let me think about it. So. I mean, I think the result of the analysis was very much expected because everything that I actually found from the result or from the analysis was actually kind of like actually making sense because I am proposing a framework here. So I have to make sure that the results that I'm getting they actually have some meaning to it. But if you ask me about if there is something that I did not know, then there might be. The park that you were seeing in the map, that was actually a fair park, and it also has a golf course. And although there are more parks, but in the data set that I was using, so I actually used the New York State property class, a particular property class. So according to that property class, there were like 3 parks, but there should be more because I'm actually just I'm just applying the framework. So the data might be like some distorted or maybe not exactly correct, but that is not exactly my concern right now because I just want to see if my framework is actually working. So that might be the point. Yeah.
All right, I'll try and ask you a better question next time. I can see you weren't really happy about that one. So let me give you one that's perhaps more suited to your analysis. One is a comment, which is I thought perhaps it would be also have been interesting to see health-related providers put on a map and seen how they might impact your analysis, because I know a lot of seniors, for instance, would perhaps be interested in using shared or micromobility, maybe active transportation in order to be able to get back and forth to their doctor's appointments, et cetera. I think that would be another area for analysis. Obviously not yours, you're done, but perhaps in the future. That's just a comment. And then the question is, did you see any folks stepping into the shared micro mobility or active transportation field in Troy? Any providers that are actually looking, like we have City Bike here in New York City. I know there are others around the area who are looking to get into that field. Are they trying to get into the mid-sized cities like Troy? Did you come across that in your analysis?
Unfortunately, as far as I know, that was an excellent question, by the way. Unfortunately, as far as I know, there was not like exactly people that working exactly on active transportation. But the New York State Department of Transportation, of course, have some bicycle and active transportation projects going on, and they also have some like people there. But I think they don't only focus on Troy, but the projects are basically in capital region like Albany and Albany, Schenectady, and those. I mean the region, the whole region. But for focusing on Troy, there might not be like people actually that work like, based on Troy. I don't think, as far as I know, I don't think that there are people.
I wasn't sure either, but I was just curious.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah.
What's up next for you?
So you're asking about my future plan?
Yes, your future plan.
Okay,
You.
so yeah, okay. So because I'm going to graduate in December, so thankfully I have got a job and I'm going to Minnesota, Rochester, and there I'm going to join as a graduate graphic engineer at City of Rochester,
Very
Minnesota.
exciting.
Yeah.
All right, congratulations. That's great. I hope you'll keep in touch and keep us updated on how that's going.
Yeah,
Terrific.
sure. Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I see that I'm talking too much, so I'm going to try and just limit it to perhaps one question or comment for each of you going forward. So Bennett, you're up. Any word on, I'm curious about any word on the reactions from the businesses who already had curb cuts in place and had to have them either relocated or perhaps reduced. I know that's always an issue for these businesses, that they rely on those curb cuts. Perhaps they acquired the property with the expectation they're going to have a certain amount of curb cut. Did you interact with them or hear anything about how that went?
Yeah, totally. I definitely that's something that we see not as an issue as a challenge and as something that we would like to be able to resolve, because as a city we operate to serve the community, and so going on site, there's definitely like property owners that were wondering what was happening or why is the city doing this, but at the same time a lot of them were understanding about it. We also tried to look at it in the perspective of the property owners. As a city, we can't close all the curb cuts that they have because because by law we would have be able to grant them access for businesses, and we can't block roads so that their businesses decrease in revenue. So at the same time, we're also working for the best of these property owners, and I think being able to present ourselves well and our intentions, and just instances when we were going on site to the properties owners and just discussing with them what's going on, and a lot of them were thankfully understanding about it. So yeah.
Really cool. Thank you. All right. So then what is up next for you, Bennett?
Yeah, so I am gonna be I'm working as a transportation engineer back out west in this Seattle metro area.
Huh?
So I'm definitely really interested in just the multimodal transportation, or just the growing area, and the growing uh, population here. But also at the same time, I've learned so much during my time in New York City, and maybe perhaps one day I might go back, see, and because there's just so much things to learn, and I think New York City as a whole is on the leading um, edge for all things transportation. So.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, I'm really excited to hear that you're going to be out on the West Coast and Afia is going to be in Minnesota. But you guys will always be members of the NYMTC family now and forever. So I'm looking forward to staying in touch with you and hearing about the successes in your careers. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, Paula, I got to keep it quick, but I can't resist noting that I've walked the Conduit Avenue corridor myself, and it is certainly not welcoming to pedestrians. So it's definitely got issues with that, much less with air noise pollution and as an urban highway. I'm very curious about the titanium dioxide coating. I'd like to learn more about that. But what caught my eye were the solar and green noise walls. And I'm wondering if you saw any use of those in the New York City area. I'm really not aware of them, but I didn't know if you, in your research, you'd come across anything.
Yeah, and not particularly in New York City area. Like the examples I had in my presentations were mainly in the Denmark, if I'm not mistaken.
Europe, yeah.
But yeah, in Europe. So actually, these are some of the recommendations we had for some sections, because we had section-specific recommendations other than the corridor wide, and in some sections, noise barriers that were mainly either vegetated or with transparent materials to not block the view and also be nice from the residential side. But yeah, there is like some very innovative options that can be done.
Definitely. That was really great to see. So thank you for sharing that. So, all right, what's up next for you?
Yeah, so I'm actually a PhD student. I'm in my second year. So for the last year, I was working on the fellowship, but I was also being initiated and taking some advanced courses in track engineering and pavement. So I'm not sure what my thesis will be yet, but it might be something related to predictive modeling of train derailments due to track geometry defects.
Wow, that sounds
Yeah.
really great. We're all looking forward to reading that. That'll be terrific when
Thank you.
when you get that far. Thank you. Please share that with us.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Paula. All right, next up is Elliot. I loved your question. What are we doing here? The idea that Department of City Planning is involved with something that other folks might see as an MTA project or question is, that interagency effort is great, and that's something that we at NYMTC are all about, is interagency efforts. So I am curious, how much interaction did you have with the MTA and maybe even with New York City DOT in your work on that project?
Yeah, that's a great question. We set up roughly, I would say, every other month calls with the MTA just to get updates on what they've been doing in terms of the IBX work, as well as kind of asking them how we can best support them with our work and what would be most useful for them going forward. Um, yeah, so we talk to them every so often.
Great.
And in terms of the DOT, the interagency, aside from the NTA, the interagency collaboration is like kind of come towards the end of the work plan for this. So actually next week we'll be having our first call with the DOT to kind of talk about, or at least tee up some of the potential opportunities for future collaboration for some of these improvements that we went through.
Really cool. That was great to hear. Thank you. So what's up next for you, Elliot?
TBD.
All right.
No comment
Well, I
yet,
know
but hopefully
you've been working
something.
in the, sorry, you go.
Oh, I was just gonna say, hopefully something transportation related, of course.
We hope so too. I was sorry to talk over you, but I know you've been working in the Department of City Planning offices. I saw you in that photo, so definitely you were, getting involved, getting to know people, and I think that was great. So hopefully that will continue at some point in some level.
Thank you.
And good luck. All right, EJ, I'm going to kick off with asking, what's your company? This kind of maybe answers the last question first, but I saw what is it, Studio IO? I didn't quite know if I got that right.
Yeah, it's a SaaS, so it's a platform for architects and engineers to potentially do a design competition and RFP together, so that they can actually launch their company. So I'm basically we got investment from Columbia, and now we're actually fundraising, and we'll see if we fly or not. Even if it flaps, I'll be perfectly happy to be an engineer or architect contributing to society and civil work on any matter. So, I found it so grateful that I get to have this mess around time of flush of opportunity. And once I'm done with my craziness and done my share, I'll potentially go back to a real normal job.
Well, it's very
Yeah.
exciting, and I hope you will share more information about that. So looking forward to hearing more. Just about your presentation, one of the elements that you mentioned that I thought was really interesting was that the $3.3 million investment, I think that was in London and San Francisco, yielded a 14% cyclist increase. And I mean, that seems like such a small amount of money to spend to get how many vehicles off the streets and how many people, using active transportation and being healthier in their lives. I mean, it just seems like a really great. I know that wasn't necessarily what your presentation was about, but but it certainly was one of the benefits that was noted. So thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
Yeah, I don't know
And
if I
with
really have.
even so little much of investment, you can actually make a great outcome also because it's expected for public to contribute. So if it's actually kind of designed it right, it actually can have a huge impact. And
Agreed, and thank you for sharing that. So, I think unfortunately I have to bring it to I really feel like I could talk to you guys all afternoon, but we've got to bring it to a close. We're already over time. Thank you for joining us. The folks that are still on the call, thank you for being here. I saw that some of the incoming class of 2025-26 was on the call, seeing what's ahead for them. So that was great to see. And we're excited to see where the program goes. And by all means, I'm not even, exaggerating. Please keep in touch, all 6 of you. We do want to hear how things go for you, and we want to, help in any way we can with your careers as we can. So thank you again. Thank you to Renee for coming. Thank you to Jerry. Thank you for Dr. Wong. Thank you for everybody, and I really appreciate it. And have a wonderful day, everyone. Take care.
thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Good job,
Thank
students.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You want to shut down? Okay.